1,000 colleges across this great nation. We've been ranked not once, because, that's luck. Not twice, and that's a fluke. 3 times, because things happen in threes. No, 4 times, that's serious business. How about 5 times in the top 10? And in 2021, we were in the top 5 in the entire nation. And we attribute that to the incredible staff and faculty that we have here at this college. And certainly as we celebrate this one book read, these are the sort of things that we do at WKCTC, just a little different, a little better. So thank you all for taking the time of being here and supporting this program. Ross Gay is the author of 4 books of poetry, against which Bringing the Shovel Down, Beholding, was winner of the Pan-American Literary Gene Stein Award, and Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, winner of the 2015 National Book Critics Circle Award and the 2016 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. His first collection of essays, The Book of Delights, was released in 2019 and was a New York Times bestseller. I said a New York Times bestseller. That's pretty good stuff. I don't care what you say. His new collection of essays, Inciting Joy, was released by Algonquin in October of 2022. I would now like to introduce Britton Shurley, our Dean of Humanities, Fine Arts, Business, and Social Sciences, and Professor of English.
All right, first off, I promise not to talk for too long tonight. You're not here to listen to me. But I do need to thank a few people that have done some really, really heavy lifting. First off, I'd really like to thank Jesse Donaldson, who prepared a fantastic book tasting out there that I hope all of y'all got to do. We also need to thank Reed Draper, who is in the back, for this fantastic set design to get us all up here in a nice, intimate environment. And Dr. Reece for his continued support of the One Book Read here at WKCTC. So I thought I'd talk for just a minute up here about what led us to choose the Book of Delights as a selection for this year. I remember we were sitting over in the Niemer building right across campus, the selection committee. We were kind of thinking about how rough the last few years have been. We had pandemic, we've had civil unrest, and then we've got just the general brutality that we see on the news on a nightly basis. And in recognition of all of that, I think we were really captivated by this book. We were captivated by its depth, its complexity, all the ways it was kind of abounding with joy. We saw this book as a gift for our students, for our community, and really a chance for us to focus our attention, or as Ross Gay might say, flex our delight muscles, and think about what brings us joy. But we also loved how the book never shied away or flinched from the harshness of reality. And in a way, that harshness asked us to pay more attention to the delights that surround us. So I have had the pleasure of hearing Ross Gay read before, so I know you are in for a good evening tonight. So please help me in welcoming Ross Gay.
Hello. It's good to see you. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. Really good to be here. We were just talking about how many great Kentucky poets there are. I'm not a Kentucky poet, but some of you all are. And anyway, it's just neat to be back in this state. I'm going to read, and also I'm grateful to you all for reading this book, as a community read. It's just, it means a lot to me. I feel lucky. I'm going to read to you a handful of poems from this, but I'm actually going to read the preface because I haven't read that for a long time. One day last July, feeling delighted and compelled to both wonder about and share that delight, I decided that it might feel nice, even useful, to write a daily essay about something delightful. I remember laughing to myself for how obvious it was. I could call it something like the Book of Delights. I came up with a handful of rules. Write a delight every day for a year, begin and end them on my birthday, August 1st, draft them quickly, and write them by hand. The rules made it a discipline for me, a practice. Spend time thinking and writing about delight every day. Because I was writing these essayettes pretty much daily, confession, I skipped some days. Patterns and themes and concerns show up. For instance, I traveled quite a bit this year. I often write in cafes. My mother is often on my mind. Racism is often on my mind. Kindness is often on my mind. Politics, pop music, books, dreams, public space. My garden is often on my mind. It didn't take me long to learn that the discipline or practice of writing these essays occasioned a kind of delight radar, or maybe it was more like the development of a delight muscle. Something that implies that the more you study delight, the more delight there is to study. A month or two into this project, delights were calling to me, write about me, write about me. Because it is rude not to acknowledge your delights, I'd tell them that though they might not become essayettes, they were still important and I was grateful to them. Which is to say, I felt my life to be more full of delight, not without sorrow or fear or pain or loss, but more full of delight. I also learned this year that my delight grows, much like love and joy, when I share it. You know, I'm writing another book of delights. I'm just sort of finishing it right now. And so it's kind of neat to hear the origins, you know, why and how. So this one is called Nicknames. I'm writing in a notebook with the words, pay attention, on the front, which is a cousin to another notebook in my bag with the words, pay attention, motherfucker, printed on it. Printed on a Chandler and Price letterpress that I co-own with my friend, which I have yet to see, for it is lodged in a print shop in Lubbock, Texas. My beloved co-owner, Pal, which makes him a kind of spouse, I suppose, who gifted me these delightful notebooks, is named Boogie, or Boogs, and was so named by me, one of my greatest literary achievements. Boogie, or Boogs, might not be the first name you'd assign to Boogie, or Boogs, for a number of reasons. Perhaps the most significant of which is that he has definitely not spent a lot of time dancing, boogieing, which you might ascertain from his appearance, which would be a wrong thing to do, though you would be right. This is one of the reasons Boogie, or Boogs, is such a great nickname. It's a kind of curveball that has, with much repetition, become utterly natural. And his Christian name, Curtis, has come to seem awkward and clunky. Kind of Lutheran, kind of curt. It's a clothesline of a name, really. It's the football kind of clothesline. Another reason I love this nickname and have now come to love how much I love this nickname is because Boogie doesn't know that every time I say his name, I am also invoking the great and similarly nicknamed L. Boogie, or Lauryn Hill, whom I am guessing wrongly, probably rightly, Boogie has never boogied to. Boogie calls me salpicon, which he tells me means sizzle, which I think fits, though it would be a safe assumption, given my own delight, that the nickname salpicon might afford Boogie some similarly pleasurable, ironic association, which I don't need to know about. I've shortened my nickname to Picon, whatever that means. Anyway, I love nicknames. They delight me. There are, evidently, people from whom nicknames are repelled like projectiles from Luke Cage's skin. Fried eggs to Teflon. My friend Patrick is one of them, though the simple Spanishification of his name, Patricio, time to time among some of us, is one that has endured, sort of, time to time. Drop the pa, jiggle the spelling, and it might be a good sticky name, Tricio. One that, in a generation or two, might become associated incorrectly and beautifully and so correctly with something arboreal, something to do with trees. How delightful is that? I, on the other hand, am a bit of a nickname magnet and have been assigned the following aliases: Bizquick, Biz, Raheem, the compassionate; Beef, Beefy, Big Man, Biggs, Biggie, Big Lil Big, Big Papa, the Big Gay, Bones, Baby Boy, Baby Gay, the Baby, Booger, Beast, Sammy, Saucy, Saucy Sauce, Saucy Pants, Dr. Sauce, Dr. Hot Sauce, Doc, the Doctor, Tall Lady, Tall Drink, Wave, Autos con Pollo, Ross the Boss, the King of Applesauce, Roski, Snozzer, Six, Sace, Unky, Daddy, and several others too lewd or private to share. I don't know exactly what nicknames mean, though a quick reading of mine and the abundance of the B sound, that babiest of sounds, Makes me think it might be primal. I know that I rarely call the people I love by their names. I call them, if it's okay with them, by the name I have given them. I wonder if this means I think of my beloveds as my children. That seems very patronizing, especially because I mostly don't give them money. But on the other hand, how lovely all my mothers, all my babies. This is called transplanting. Today I have smuggled 3 fig cuttings onto a flight from Philadelphia to Detroit. Truth be told, no smuggling has occurred, given as I was carrying the things open and notorious, their roots tucked into some moist compost in a plastic bag. But smuggling makes it sound more thrilling than what it appears, carrying a few sticks in a bag, and therefore more like what it is, carrying living creatures for replanting about 700 miles away, which you might have already gone there, given as I've told you they're figs, is another way of saying I'm carrying joy around in my bag. Actually, right now it's in the overhead compartment in that plastic bag, probably a little funky with my dirty clothes. This is one of those delights that keeps piling up. As the fig tree I took these cuttings from in Stephanie's mother's backyard in Frenchtown, New Jersey, was itself made of a cutting from a grove of figs farther down the Delaware in Langhorne, Pennsylvania, where my friend Jay's family lived and where his father grew a wonderful garden, including bitter melon, Asian pears, peaches, ong choy, and yes, these figs. When I first asked if I could transplant some of Mr. Lau's figs, he was moving and I was heartbroken that that garden would no longer be a sanctuary to me. He said yes, if he even said that, walked me out to the grove of figs beneath his massive chestnut tree, grabbed a pickaxe, and started hacking. I was kind of terrified, green thumb that I was. 2 ancillary delights. Mr. Lau, old school, OG, actually got a turtle, drilled a hole in its shell, tied a string to a nut about the hole size, which he then dropped into that hole, tying the other end of the string to a stick in the middle of his lettuces so that he could have a steady, if coerced, slug patrol. That's not the delight. The delight is that his son, my pal Jay, under cover of night, dislodged the nut from the shell, carried the critter on his bike, one-handed, no helmet, to a nearby tributary of Neshaminy Creek, the Things River Jordan. Ancillary delight, too, with the twinge of irony, when people say they have a black thumb, meaning they can't grow anything, and I say, yeah, me too, then talk about the abundant garden these black thumbs are growing. Then we stuck the cuttings in a bucket full of water, and he did, in fact, tell me not to let them dry out. Yesterday, when I dug up a few of Stephanie's mother's figs, I used a shovel and hacked at the roots like Mr. Lau, though I was sending soothing mind beams to the tree as I did so. After I got a few well-rooted cuttings, I took them to the bucket near the hose, filled it up, dropped them in, showered, and dressed for the funeral of a beloved 20-year-old kid named Rachel who fell to her death a few nights ago. While Stephanie was telling me over the phone about Rachel's death, she said 2 butterflies alighted on the butterfly bush we had just planted. When we were standing in the back corner of the funeral home during the eulogies, I moved there because I'm tall and called Stephanie over so we could listen together. Stephanie caught sight of a silver gleam on the gray carpet. When the eulogy was over, she picked it up, a single elephant earring. Elephants were Rachel's favorite animal. She adored them. When we got home, after the pizza and guacamole, my guacamole, a delight. Another delight, here's the recipe: avocado, onion, garlic, salt, really. I grabbed the bucket, trimmed the cuttings into sticks, potted them in the plastic bag, and set them on the counter, where they sat like promises, little converters, little dreamers of coming back into bloom, and how we might carry that with us wherever we go. This is called bird feeding. Today I was walking through Washington Square Park in New York, bundled up against, thank God, a seasonably cold day for once. And after a brief conversation with the dosa man who told me to come back in an hour, I noticed a guy whose back faced me with a pigeon for a head. When I looked closer, a touch alarmed, I realized he actually just had a pigeon on his shoulder. Closer still, and I saw that the pigeon was whispering into his ear, not wobbling at all on the slick north face perch. And closer still, it's called gawking, yes, revealed simply this guy feeding the pigeon, the bird dipping its head into the hand the man must have been holding very near his own face, so that the feeding was not only kind of romantic, but alluded to that original feeding the bird experienced, a mother dropping masticated victuals into the tiny chirper's gaped mouth, which is, after all, the first romance. It looked like so many things, I'm realizing, writing this. In some way, the two looked to be dancing, slow dancing, swaying, turning almost imperceptible circles oblivious to the handful of park dwellers in a semicircle of benches around them, enjoying the sun. God damn, I thought, walking through the giant arch onto Fifth Avenue. God damn, how often do you get to see someone slow dancing with a pigeon? And not 30 seconds later, walking toward 8th Street, giggling at my good fortune, a tufted titmouse swooped right by my head, landing on a wrought iron gate, upon which a pedestrian walking by me immediately pulled from her snazzy jacket pocket a baggie of crumbs. And the bird hopped directly into her hand, nuzzling the goodies, intermittent with tweeting toward its new pal. The bird and woman both nodding at me, gawking at them, smiling at my bafflement, as though to say, we're everywhere. This is one I wanted to read. I never read this one. There's some I just never read. You know, when there's 100 essays in the book, you kind of never read some. Maybe after I read this, I'll know why. Let's see. Do any of you know that song Stay by Lisa Loeb? Yeah. A deliciously corny song just came on that might have once been your favorite too. Just like it was my most sociopathic childhood friends. My friend who, with another pal, snuck into our home while my parents were sleeping upstairs. We were an easy mark, the key was in the mailbox, and rearranged the furniture, the couch facing the wall, the chairs stacked up, and the dining room table in the living room. I actually came home from my girlfriend's late that night after my buddies had done their stealth interior design work, and I thought, Mom and Dad are officially off their rockers. And then I went to bed. But when my mother woke me up pissed off about the tomfoolery, I immediately suspected these two assholes. We were a legion of pranksters, truth be told. A couple of my besties. And I dialed up the unsociopathic asshole and told him my mother tripped in the early morning dark because someone had rearranged our furniture in the night as a joke, and she busted out her tooth. A trick I can't take all the credit for. My dad gave me the idea when he was yelling at me. Mom could have knocked her tooth out. Why the singular rather than the plural, I will never know. Being unsociopathic, he immediately confessed and apologized profusely and almost wept, and was so kind as to also alert me to the sociopath's involvement. So when I called the sociopath and employed the same mode of entrapment, my mom tripped and busted out a tooth and had to be rushed to the dental hospital. This buddy said, more or less, bummer. Which is why the next day when driving with my girlfriend and spotting a fat roadkill possum, I convinced her to pull over so I could toss the thing in the trunk before depositing it on the sociopath's doorstep. Where inside, I know, it's like high school boys, like, put them away, you know. Where, for all I know, he was watching the video. Sweet Lisa Loeb in that big empty loft and those dorky glasses with the turtle shell rims, singing softly along, re-falling in love as she pleads. You said that I was naive, and I thought that I was strong. I thought, oh, I can leave, oh, but now I know that I was wrong, 'cause I miss you. Ooh, I miss you. I had to get that melody, I forgot it. I told you. The bloated possum's empty eyes looking through the door and the game over. The thing that I neglect to say, I was rereading that, and I was like, oh, I didn't say, I wonder why I didn't say, because my buddy got home, and he came home, and there were cops at the house, because, of course, his sister had called the police. He said, I think I know the culprit. This is called Umbrella in the Cafe. I'm on my way to New Brunswick for a reading and decided to stop in Jersey City at a bakery on Jersey Avenue called Chacopan. That food was so good tonight. That was just amazing. Yeah, I just want to say. And lovely, how everything, it was just so sweet and good. At a bakery on Jersey Avenue called Chacopan, with croissants and quiche that smelled so good as I walked in this morning, I closed my eyes and reached out like I was falling. This place is kitty corner to a place called Nicole's, a West Indian joint where they have the best roti I have ever eaten. And when I stopped in yesterday on my way into New York to get one, the owner, Nicole, said to me, I was just thinking about you on Sunday. Had she not added Sunday, the cynic in me might have thought she was just being a good business person. But that Sunday made it precise and kind of holy, like maybe she was praying for me. And however it was, I flitted through Nicole's mind, a little butterfly, a little flutter by, delights me, given the cancer she has been afflicted with these past several years. How beautiful and dark she looked, like maybe she'd gone home for a few weeks, I wondered. In the bakery, let me interrupt myself to acknowledge how often thus far in my journey of delight, a food or food-type establishment and experience is the occasion of a delight. That it might form a kind of atlas or map of delights, which is a very good idea for a book, perhaps a companion book to this one, The Map of Delights. I was sitting here reading C.D. Wright's last book, which I love and mourn its being the last one, forever the last one. And where I'm sitting near the door with my legs crossed, I am long-leggedly tall, and sometimes it's a puzzle where to put my legs. My right foot, in a now very large-seeming red sneaker, is in the path of every single person who walks in the door and out the door, which makes for a lanky and regular semi-distraction from the page. The proximity, the negotiation, the closeness also means many contacts again and again as I bob my big red foot down, but briefly, so as not to catch a cramp in my hamstring or a calf, which would be dangerous. A guy on his way out, after buying his Americano and scooting by my big red bobbing foot and smiling softly at me and me at him, looked at the drizzle through the big plate glass window, put his coffee down, opened his umbrella, put it over his head, picked up his coffee, and then realized, I presume, that he was still inside this bakery. The window was very clean. I saw him giggle to himself, realizing, I think, what he had done. Let me interrupt myself to mention that a man with a sack of some sort slung over his shoulder just entered Chacopan and exclaimed, "Good morning, Jersey City family." And so he lowered his umbrella and walked quickly out with a smirk that today I read as a smirk of gentleness, of self-forgiveness. Do you ever think of yourself late to your meeting, or peed your pants some, or sent the private email to the group, or burned the soup, or that one landed, the private email to the group, or late to your meeting, peed your pants, or burned the soup, or ordered your cortado with your fly down, or snot on your face, or opened your umbrella in the bakery as the cutest little thing? I think maybe I'll do about, what do you think about, where are we at for time? Okay. I'll read about 3 more, and then we can do Q&A, and maybe during the Q&A, if it's useful to do another. This is called Bobblehead. You know those bobblehead toys? I suspect there will be no more apparently superficial delight than this one, given as I am swirling in a volley of birdsong, given the pine tree just beyond me has a branch like an arm bent into a greeting, given the near glowing green of these trees against the soft blue of a misty morning, but it is true, I adore bobblehead toys, one of which passed me on a dashboard maniacally agreeing to everything. As a kid, I might also have loved the Weeble Wobble, or at least I loved the commercial, which is probably the closest I got to that toy, for which I commend my parents, given, as I recall, the purpose of the toy was to encourage a child to strike it as hard as possible to see if it would stay down. Bad toy idea. I Googled the Weeble Wobble to find that I've conflated the Weeble Wobble with the Bozo and, I imagine, other people-faced punching bags. Bad toy idea still. The syrup-filled Godzilla my folks got me one Christmas when I was about 4 would not, for another child, have been a bad toy idea. But for me, it was simply a Godzilla-shaped blunt object with which to beat my big brother, whom I loved, but I didn't yet know how to express that love, thanks to all the Weeble Wobble commercials, probably. People-faced punching bag commercials, I mean. Thankfully, my grandmother noticed this ignorance on my part, snatching the Godzilla from my hand on my backswing as my brother cowered below and thunked me on the head with it, hard, just once. It was a similar tutelage when I was tugging Spot's floppy spotted ear on the farm while she was feeding the chickens. Hearing Spot's yelps, she marched toward us and yanked my ear hard, just once. I fell to the ground and rolled my eyes into my head, which I spent a lot of time practicing with my brother on car rides, making it so only the whites showed. My other grandmother, my Nana, who had more of a reputation for clocking people, sat next to my granny on the couch, singing high-pitched notes of approval. I could hear in my curly-headed labyrinth of revenge my granny whispering my name, in the diminutive, of course, Rossi, Rossi, and gradually getting louder, which I used as encouragement to crank my eyes even further, even longer. A good show my mom ruined by saying something like, "Oh, please, give me a break." The dumb plasticness of the toys, which are often in the likeness of famous athletes, makes me wonder if it's the toy itself that delights me, or if it is the fact that the toy alerts me regularly to the fact that people are delighted by such goofy, ridiculous things, which reminds me of a fairly common childlikeness, which encourages soft-heartedness, I think. This is called an abundance of public toilets. I don't mean this delight to diminish the dignity-violating absence of public toilets, public bathrooms in New York City, which is a failure and a carelessness, a ruthlessness, in fact, that reminds me somehow ours is a country where property is more valued than people are. Nor do I want this delight, which was occasioned by the lavatorial deprivation New York City is, which every one of you has a friend with a bad story about, to be a delight about deprivation. They're like, man, it's about bathrooms. I'm getting out of here. We're out of here. Though it might be that deprivation and the alleviation or deprivation of that deprivation is one of the sources of delight. Source is the wrong word. One of the flashlights upon delight, the unveilers, the ticklers. Some word that explains how delight originates in the delighted is what I mean, and is simply stimulated or awakened. Not too long ago, I was buying some lumber at the local hardware store to build a raised bed. It was summer, melon season, a time of year I tend to be abundantly hydrated. As I was sliding my 2x12s into the car, I realized I really needed to pee, like really, really. But for some reason, I felt shy asking to use the loo. I wanted an espresso anyway and figured I'd just pull into the bakery around the corner, except when I got there, all the parking was taken. And now it was bad, real bad. And so I started looking around for abandoned buildings or little clutches of trees where I could piss, but I had no luck, being more or less downtown. Not to mention the muscles of my mid and lower back were now starting to seize up, thanks to whatever taxing physiological business clamps the urethra shut. I had a friend once who had to pee bad, but being a new guy at a law firm in a meeting that wouldn't stop, he held it for a very long time until the meeting did finally stop. And while removing his member from his slacks at the urinal, he fainted. I will never forget this story. And given as mine is a small town and mine is a public occupation, I thought better of pulling into the parking lot next to the family video and letting loose against the wall in full view of everyone on Grime Street. One of them, of course, an old student who got a C-, capturing my indecent drainage with his phone for later upload. I chose instead to pee my pants in my car. I peed and peed in my pants my shorts, in my car. And then I peed some more. The word chose there made the not exactly accident seem more volitional than it really was. Though driving while in a bathroom panic is unsafe, and so I approve of my choice for that reason too. Regardless, the delight of the car peeing was in the alleviation of the mental and physical anguish of holding the pee in. It was a deprivation of a deprivation. And the delight, for it was a delight as the vinyl seats of my Subaru became a pool of well-hydrated urine, would not have occurred had the original deprivation, having to pee and nowhere to do it, not occurred. Yeah, there's some shame and such. This essay is helping me work it out. I fully understand that this delight and what is coming to look like an appeal to you to view it as such might not be a delight for you. Delight is like that. All the same, it seems illuminating. And so it was that when I was in Greenwich Village, again well hydrated, but this time from coffee, without a bathroom, and I asked the barista where he might urinate if he couldn't pee in the place where he just spent $4.50 for a short fucking Americano. He pointed to the park across the street, which had a porta potty. When I entered, I found that it was a very clean porta potty. And urinating, I noticed for the first time, standing up and kind of tall like I am, that the tops of porta potties have screens that you can look out of, which I did. Like I was in a confessional, like I was a priest, watching the parishioners walk by as the noon bells to the nearby church started to ring. And let me do one more for you, if that's okay. Okay. This one's called Loitering. God, 3 cafes in a row. I'm sitting at a cafe in Detroit where in the door window is a sign with the commands, no soliciting, no loitering, stacked like an anvil. I have a fiscal relationship with this establishment, which I developed by buying a coffee and which makes me a patron. And so even though I subtly dozed in the late afternoon sun pouring under the awning, the $2 spent protects me, at least temporarily, from the designation of loiterer. Though the dozing, if done long enough, or ostentatiously enough, or with enough delight, might transgress me over. Loitering, as you know, means fucking off, or doing jack shit, or jacking off. And given that 2 of those 3 terms have sexual connotations, it's no great imaginative leap to know that it is a repressed and repressive, sexual and otherwise, culture, at least, that invented and criminalized the concept. Someone reading this might very well keel over considering loitering a concept and not a fact. Such are the gales of delight. The Webster's definition of loiter reads thus: to stand or wait around idly without apparent purpose, and to travel indolently with frequent pauses. Among the synonyms for this behavior are linger, loaf, laze, lounge, lollygag, dawdle, amble, saunter, meander, putter, dilly-dally, and mosey. Any one of these words, in the wrong frame of mind, might be considered critique or noun epithet. You lollygagger, or you loafer. Indeed, lollygag was one of the words my mom would use to cajole us while jingling her keys when she was waiting on us, which, judging from the visceral response I had while writing that memory, must have been not quite infrequent. All of these words to me imply having a nice day. They imply to me having the best day. They also imply being unproductive, which leads to being, if only temporarily, non-consumptive. And this is a crime in America, and more explicitly criminal depending upon any number of quickly apprehended visual cues. For instance, the darker your skin, the more likely you are to be loitering, though a Patagonia jacket could do some work to disrupt that perception. A Patagonia jacket, colorful pants, tree-torn sneakers with short socks, an Ivy League ball cap, and a thick book, not the Bible, and you're almost golden. Almost. There is a Venn diagram someone might design, several of them, that will make visual our constant internal negotiation towards safety. And like the best comedy, it will make us laugh hard before saying, Lord. It occurs to me that laughter and loitering are kissing cousins, as both bespeak an interruption of production and consumption. And it's probably for this reason that I have been among groups of non-white people laughing hard who have been shushed in a Qdoba in Bloomington, in a bar in Fishtown, in the Harvard Club at Harvard. The shushing perhaps reminds how threatening to the order are our bodies in non-productive, non-consumptive delight. The moment of laughter not only makes consumption impossible, you might choke, but if the laugh is hard enough, if the shit talk is just right, food or drink might fly from your mouth. If not, and this kind of hurts, your nose. And if your body is supposed to be one of the consumables, if it is one of the consumables around which so many ideas of production and consumption have been structured in this country, well, there you go. There is a Carrie Mae Weems photograph of a woman in what looks to be some kind of textile factory with an angel embroidered to the left breast of her shirt, where her heart resides. The woman, like the angel, has her arms splayed wide, almost in ecstasy, as though to embrace everything. So in the midst of her glee is she. Every time I see that photo, after I smile and have a genuine bodily opening on account of witnessing this delight, which is a moment of black delight, I look behind her for the boss. Uh-oh, I think. Heads up, you're in a moment of non-productive delight. Which points to another of the synonyms for loitering, which I almost wrote as delight, taking one's time. For while the previous list of synonyms alludes to time, taking one's time makes it kind of plain. For the crime of loitering, the idea of it, is about ownership of one's own time, which must be sometimes wrested from the assumed owners of it, who are not you, back to the rightful, who is. And while having interpolated the policing of delight such that I am on the lookout for the overseer, even in photos I have studied hundreds of times, on the lookout always for the policer of delight, my work is studying this kind of glee, being on the lookout for it and aspiring to it, floating away from the factory as she seems to be. Thank you.
All right, we will open this up for some questions for Ross. If you have a question, just raise your hand and I will bring you the microphone so that everyone can hear you. But we shall officially open the floor.
As a fellow gardener, I've got to know, how'd the figs do?
Oh, yeah. You know, it's funny. Those figs are like these figs that have been circulating. I work with a community orchard in Bloomington. I have for years. And some of those figs are actually in this community orchard in Bloomington. But I'm trying to think if those figs, where we brought them. I can't remember even if I was bringing them to our garden or if I was bringing them to, like, give to someone else. But I suspect they're doing fine. Yeah. Thanks for asking, yeah.
Okay, as a teacher, I'm wondering when and what was your inspiration for your poetic nature?
Great question. I don't know the answer exactly to that. I can say that I had a professor my second year at college. So I played football in college. I got to college because I played football. And I was close. I was having trouble, and I was close to, like, failing out probably. And I had a professor who saw that I was sort of flailing, and he had me give a presentation on Amiri Baraka. It was like a 20th century American poetry class or something. And I just read it and was moved and started reading poems very seriously from that, and then writing poems too. David Johnson's his name.
So it was later in your education.
Totally later. But when I think of that too, like I think of these other, that's like where I kind of pinpoint something like, oh, okay, poems. That's kind of neat.
Yeah.
But like my mother was an English teacher for a while, and the more I think of it, the more I think of it, the more I think of like, okay, so my mom was from northern Minnesota. She talked a certain kind of way. My father's from Youngstown, Ohio. Mm-hmm. He talked a certain kind of way. They're different. just having like these languages, different languages in the house.
So you're interested in that.
Yeah, totally. Like and that my mother is like into hyperbole. Like one of the things that we do, me, my brother, and my mom, we get together, like, we'll tease my mom and we pile it up and like how we'd be running through the kitchen and then she'd like smack us with, from the, the batter she's making oatmeal cookies and she smacks us in the head and then we pile it up. She smacks us both in the head and we get these cookies in our head and then blah, 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 and then, on and on and on. And my mother loves that shit. She can pile on, which is a kind of metaphorical thinking. Right. She just goes for it. But I also think that I grew up in an apartment complex with a ton of kids, so and kids also from other languages being spoken. Right. I also think of my 11th grade English teacher, Ms. Cameron, who I was at one of my teachers' memorials, Gerald Stern's beautiful poet, very important to me, who died in October, I think it's October. And at the memorial, this is a longer answer that you wanted, but I guess I feel like talking about this.
I'm enjoying it.
At the memorial, a woman said, "Hey, I know your 11th grade English teacher. She's my best friend." I said, Ms. Cameron? And she said, "You remember?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I remember." And she said, "Well, the last time she saw you." And I said, No, the last time I saw her was on Main Street in Newtown, Pennsylvania in 2006. And she's like, "Why do you remember that?" I said, "Because I just got my PhD and my first book was about to come out. And in Ms. Cameron's class, I did jack shit. I did absolutely nothing." And so when I told her that, she was like, she almost fainted. Anyway, I got on the phone at my beloved teacher's memorial, and I'm walking around on this phone, which is not like me. And I'm like, "Ms. Cameron, blah, blah, blah." We're talking a little bit, and I say this thing, which I learned from her, which is this lesson that I learned. It was one of the main things that I learned in a classroom. I learned a lot from my coaches. That's where I was sort of focused. But Ms. Cameron said, she was a middle-aged woman, divorced, and she said that when she would go to restaurants by herself, the host would usually say, "Are you alone?" And she'd say, "No, I'm with myself." I never forgot that. And I told her this story over the phone. I said, "Ms. Cameron, I go around the country and I'm reading and I'm talking, and I reference you quite a bit because I always tell the story about how I was such a miserable student in my Shakespeare class, but I remember this story." And she said, "Actually, Ross, 11th grade English was American literature. It wasn't Shakespeare." So I was like, I was worse than I thought. I was worse. But her too, like the things you sort of osmotically receive from a teacher who could say something that brilliant, like, "I'm not alone. I'm with myself," So anyway, I could make a really dotted map of people who just things that mattered, Thanks for that question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You have a question, Dr. Reece?
Yeah, I'm just curious. How long did it take you to write the Book of Delight? And
it was
what
1
inspired
year. It was 1 year. So the project was to go August 1st to August 1st. Now, I revised it probably for another year. Yeah, but that was a weird project because then actually we were talking a little bit about how writing poems and stuff, making poems, it's a long process. And so my first book, it probably took, my first book of poems, it was the best poems that I'd written from the time I was about 24 until the time I was about 30. So it's like a 6-year project. My second book of poems was 4 or 5 years and on and on. My fourth book of poems was probably being worked on over 9 years or something. But this thing, because it was just like a program, write every day for a year and see what happens, that was a different thing. And it's sort of intimidating too, because a little bit, if you're used to writing slowly as I am, it's a little bit daunting to be like, well, this was quicker work. It kind of lets you make it as good as you can, but it also changes your relationship maybe to expertise or mastery, I think, something like that, yeah. Thank you. There's a question.
What happened to your psychopath friend?
I think he's a sociopath. I don't know. I don't know. I think he's doing fine. Like someone said, he's doing fine. Yeah, he was a sweet dude, but he he was like that. Yeah. My other buddy who confessed immediately, he's an ER doctor, and so that's good,
I was struck just a few moments ago as you were finishing up, and I looked around the room and realized this is a very heavily female audience. Mm. Is that representative of your readings or do you think your readership, and why?
I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I don't know. You haven't been to all my readings, but
Yeah, this
I
is
don't
my
think.
first. I'm like, I was just like, wow, it's a
Yeah.
pretty significant difference.
Yeah.
And so it really hit me. And
Yeah.
I didn't know if you always experienced that or just happened to be tonight.
It's
or,
funny, because my whole like writing, the breadth of my stuff is my poems and these essays. But now that you say that, it does make me wonder: is there some kind of like, are certain people more inclined or more interested? Or I don't know the answer to that. But when you said it, it does make me think, that's interesting. My poems for sure. Like I feel like my poems and the essays too. But like, there's definitely a way that there are questions that I'm writing about that men are interested in. Like I hear people talk about the way that I'm thinking about masculinity. But that's a great question. That's a really great question. And then it's a really great, the next great question is like, and why would that be? Yeah, I know. Now I'm going to be like, yeah. Thanks for asking that. There's one.
So I've heard you mention Luke Cage twice because of a poem I've read before from you.
Mentioning what?
Luke Cage. Do you still read comics?
Oh, not too much, but I did recently. Do you read comics? What do you read?
I read a lot of everything.
You do.
I like Batman.
Yeah, I don't really read comics too much anymore, but I'll tell you what, I had the flu in 2016, and I watched that Luke Cage series like no one's business, Yeah, they're great, and I'm not like a TV person, but I watched that. That was also like a thing about like, I didn't really read as a kid. I wasn't a big reader, but I read comic books hard. I read all of the Luke Cage books. I was deep in them. In addition to like skateboarding magazines. That was sort of what I was reading. And when I go back and read those, because I did actually, a buddy of mine got like how they make they compile them, got me the old Luke Cage things. And I'm like, oh, there's like a lot of the questions that I'm interested in, social justice and like redemption and all these things that are interesting to me are very much in those Luke Cage. I think the Marvel comics generally, they're pretty neat and they're complicated. They're not like, no one's good. No one's just good. No one's just pure. They're like people.
Sorry. So when the pandemic started, I was in Seattle and we shut down very, very early.
Yeah.
And so we were trapped in our house. And one of the things that I started doing was reading this book to my kids. Because I was like, look, everything might be terrible, but let's find the joy. So I want to know, is there a book or something that you go to when you need to find joy? Like, do you read somebody? Or
Oh, great question. Great question. I don't think I do. I don't think I do specifically for that. It's funny, like I'm trying to think of like what I return to. And I do return to certain things. Like for instance, my teacher, Gerald Stern, I reread his essays and his poems a lot. And he's a big model to me, and the work that he does, it's like full of sort of like the fullness of life, I would say. There's the sorrow and the delight are often mixed together. But I never thought of it as like a returning, like a sort of need.
comforting?
Yeah, like particularly for joy. But when you say it, it's funny because when I think of joy, I think of like connection. I think of like the practices of our entanglement. What do we do to practice belonging to one another? And that guy is kind of like one of my dads. And it is kind of interesting to think about like what are the things you return to, and do the things that you return to, is it because they give you a source of connection?
Yes.
Which obviously, when you're locked in your house, it's easy to feel like disconnected, Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to think more about that. There's music that
Yes.
Like Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace is a album that I just go to hard and was going to. Oh my God, I just got chills a little bit thinking about how necessary that felt and feels. Erykah Badu, I go to hard. Earth, Wind, and Fire, I go to really hard. And a lot of others too. But yeah. And thanks for telling me that. That's nice. Oh.
Hey, hi.
How are
When you got hooked for poetry,
Yeah.
who did you feel the most drawn to or inspired by with their work?
Amiri Baraka was the most important poet. He's one of my most important poets, yeah. He was the first poet I read, really. And I mean, there was a selected Baraka called Translucency. And I carried that book around. I wore that. It was a library book. I wore that book out. So that would be like the first, But then there are other like very near, like Sylvia Plath at the same time. I think of it as like an interesting pair, Baraka and Plath. You wouldn't necessarily put them in the same, except for time. But I was so deep in Sylvia Plath too. It's kind of Baraka and Plath, and then other probably Black Arts Movement. Sonia Sanchez or Etheridge Knight. There's a poet named Etheridge Knight who is very much like a kind of guide to me. But yeah, I think it's fair to say Baraka was the most important poet to me. Yeah. Even in terms of too, like, I would like, as a kid, as like learning how to be a poet in college and grad school, I would like look to see where he was I went like this, but we didn't do that, we didn't do that. We, like whatever, you look for a sign somewhere, and oh shit, Baraka's gonna be there. And I would go everywhere. I would try to see him read anywhere I could. And I remember seeing him read, there is a thing called the Dodge Poetry Festival, but it used to be a little bit in this kind of wonderful old village in Waterloo, New Jersey. And Baraka read there often. All these great poets, Lucille Clifton, Amiri Baraka, Gerald Stern, Robert Bly, like all these, Joy Harjo, I saw her read there a couple times. But Baraka read there once, and it was really like the first time I had cried since I was like, a little kid. The reading was so powerful. It was so formative that it kind of instructed me on how actually to read poems. Not only what poems could do to you, but how you might offer them. Yeah, I kind of need to write about Baraka, because I love him so much. Yeah.
You mentioned El Boogie. So,
yes.
So what is your favorite song on the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill?
The one with D'Angelo probably. Nothing Even Matters? Oh my God. I love that song so much. I mean, that whole record is so good. But that song, is Zion on that song? Yeah, and those might be the two. For a while, I was really going hard listening to the MTV Unplugged record, which I think is amazing. People don't really know a lot about that record, but it's like, her voice is different, like it's a little raspier, it's older. It breaks sometimes. She kind of breaks up, like she's kind of like, she's older, she's going through stuff in a different kind of way. That is such a beautiful, powerful album. But on the Miseducation, which is a deep album, and a lot of people I have a friend named Patrick Rosal who I keep on, he is so deep in that record, in part because like the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill is a reference to the book, The Miseducation of the Negro, by the pedagogical scholar who I'm forgetting his name right now, Carter G. Woodson, who studied in the Philippines. So it's during the Philippine-American War where he was sort of looking at the kind of colonial educational apparatus where he was seeing, oh, this is messing these people up. This is messing black people up. And Lauryn Hill is putting herself, like she's like absent in the first little skit. Lauryn, or whatever they say, Lauryn Hill, and she's absent. I'm out of school. I'm leaving. She's tangling with that whole kind of historical thing as like a first solo record, and then that it's like soulful, that it's irreverent, that it's like, kind of like radical in these ways, is just I mean, that's an important record. That's a really important record. And when I see people write about it pretty good, I'm like, that's pretty good. But this record is like, you know. So anyway, if you ever encounter this guy named Patrick Rosal, he's a good poet, one of my best friends, tell him to write that book. Looks like that's it.
All right. I have one more official duty to do. Hold on. So we have this kind of official thing in Paducah where you can become a Duke of Paducah.
Oh, yeah.
I have a mayoral proclamation here that officially entitles you to become a Duke of Paducah. So, this hereby confers this honor with all rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereunto appertaining. The mayor has testified where he has caused these letters to be made patent and the seal of the city to hereunto be affixed. Done on Paducah on the 14th day of March in the year of our Lord 2023. You are officially named a Duke of Paducah, sir.
Thank you. Hey, let me say too, real quick, like, thank you for your questions. It's just part of the fun about this stuff is doing this job is to write the book and then to realize that you never stop learning the book, you know. So it's always a kind of unknowing with other people and becoming along with other people. So anyway, grateful for you all for being here and doing this, and thanks for bringing me. Yeah.
So we will have a book signing out in the Clemens Gallery immediately following me speaking to you right here. While you're out there, please check out, we have some broadsides that were completed by our visual communication students. So a broadside is an image and text on the same page, like a small poster, and they all took passages from the Book of Delights and visually interpreted as well. So as you're waiting in line to get your book signed, take a look at the artwork. There are books for sale out there as well. So please join us out there. And thank you again for coming.